Right on time.
When I do this, you can't see your shirt.
Yeah. Gotta get used to it. Oh wait, that door doesn't open. You have to come in this way. He's got swagger.
Sorry.
Like the big chairs.
Hello.
This is Jordan.
I just ordered it. And I can just give mine.
And, you know, I mean, I had that experience myself. I had a small business 3 years ago, and while I could pay a decent wage, you know, I was paying over $15 an hour for my employees. I couldn't provide health care for them. And so I lost employees in that exact situation. As president, we created a new cabinet level position, Secretary of Technology and the Department of Technology, which would regulate artificial intelligence and other new emerging technologies that, you know, can be beneficial to society, but at the same time can also cause problems that we've seen with the loss of jobs and automation.
Do you want email?
You know, he would embody a non-interventionist style of foreign policy, saying on his campaign website that he would repeal the authorization for the use of military force, fully returning that power to Congress, which is where it should be. In addition to that, Andrew supports a constitutional amendment that would overturn Citizens United. And this is one of the biggest problems with our current elections, is that we've got all of this dark money that gets involved. And we need to be able to see where that's coming from and see what's actually happening there. So this is just a short list of the issues. And at this point in time, I'd like to welcome Andrew Yang.
Wherever I go. That was the best summary ever.
Thank you.
I will now take questions. Is this mic, do you have my name on it? Hello all, I'm Andrew Yang. I'm running for president as a Democrat in 2020. And it's certainly nothing I ever thought I would do. I was brought up not to think, frankly, that running for president was something realistic. My parents immigrated to this country. They met as graduate students at UC Berkeley. My father got his PhD in physics. My mom got her master's in math. I grew up in upstate New York. My parents told me to do well in school, which I tried to do. And I became an entrepreneur after a lot of stumbles, and it sounds like Kelsey might have had some experience with this as well. How many of you all have started a business or organization, or a club, or a book club, or a mailing list? So if you've done anything like that at any point, you know it's really, really hard. And then if someone asks you how it's going, what do you have to say? Great. Going great. Perfect. It's always going great. So my first business went great till it failed. Had a mini rise and maximum fall. So I knew firsthand how hard it was to start a business, but I stuck with it for another 10 years. Eventually became the head of an education company that grew to become #1 in the United States and was bought by a bigger company in 2009. Now 2009 was the wake of the financial crisis. How was that here in Muscatine, in this area, by the way? It was rough? It was rough in much of the country, and I thought I had some insight as to why the mess, the breakdown of the economy had occurred. It was because so many of our whiz kids were heading to Wall Street to become Excel jocks and not doing anything productive. Same thing was happening on the other side of the country. They're heading to Silicon Valley to become computer geniuses, and those things were not necessarily generative for most of the country. So I quit my job. I started a nonprofit called Venture for America, and the goal was to train hundreds of entrepreneurs to start businesses in places like St. Louis, Detroit, Birmingham, New Orleans, places away from the coast around the country. I spent 7 years doing that work, helped create several thousand jobs. It was so successful that I was invited to the White House with my wife to meet President Obama. So my in-laws liked me for about a week. But while I was being clapped on the back for helping create these jobs, I had this uneasy feeling that the economy was changing in much more dramatic and profound ways, and that even as I was being celebrated for creating several thousand jobs, we were eliminating many, many more jobs. And then in 2016, Donald Trump became our president. If you're in this room, some of you had a very negative reaction to that. Some of you probably supported Donald Trump. I'm sure all of you have neighbors who supported Donald Trump. And that's a certainty because Donald Trump won Iowa by 9 points. He didn't just win Iowa by 9 points, he won Wisconsin, he won most of the Midwest. And if you turn on cable news, why would you think that Donald Trump is our president today? You're smiling. Russia, I'm sorry. Russia, racism, Facebook, the FBI, Hillary Clinton, some cocktail of those reasons. But I'm a numbers guy, and the numbers tell a different story. The numbers say the reason why Donald Trump is our president today is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. All of these states were the states Donald Trump needed to win and did win. And now what happened to those jobs is happening to retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, and eventually truck driving jobs throughout our economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live here in Muscatine or in this area? And why are those stores closing? Amazon sucking up $20 billion in business every single year. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. That is your math, Iowa. 20 million out, zero back. $1 trillion tech company somehow paid less in taxes than everyone in this room. 30% of your stores and malls are closing as we speak. And the most common job in most of the country is working as a retail clerk. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $11 an hour. What is her next move after her store closes? Welfare. How many of you have seen a self-serve kiosk when you go into a McDonald's or other fast food chain? Yeah. You've seen them because McDonald's has said they're going to have a self-serve kiosk in every location in the U.S. by 2021. Meanwhile, food service and food preparation is the third most common job category in the United States. Where are those jobs going to go after McDonald's succeeds in automating first the front of the house, and now they're working on the back of the house? How many of you know someone who drives a truck for a living? Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states, including this one. I was just at Iowa 80 in Davenport. Biggest truck stop in the country, and it proudly says that 5,000 people stop there every day. On the other side of the country, my friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. They tell me that they are 98% of the way there. How many of you knew that there are robot trucks on the highways right now in Arizona? What is this going to mean for the 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck for a living, or the 7 million Americans who work at truck stops like Iowa 80 and motels and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal? Donald Trump is not the cause of our problems. He's a symptom. He's the manifestation. We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. When is the last time you heard a politician say the words fourth industrial revolution?
Right now.
Just now, and I'm barely a politician. So this is what got me into this race, is that Donald Trump wins in 2016. I look up and I say, wow, for some reason we're confused about what's happening to us. And my first move was not to run for president, because I'm not a loon. I'm not like, oh, well, some of these other people have been like gearing up for this for years. It's like, hey, you know, I mean, I was just like, okay, my first move is not to run for president. I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., to our leaders, present the case, and say, what are we going to do about the fact that America's confused? It is not immigrants that are causing these economic dislocations. When you go to a warehouse or a fulfillment center or a factory in Michigan or Iowa, you do not find wall-to-wall immigrants. You find wall-to-wall machines, wall-to-wall robots. You've seen it on your farms. You've seen it happen to your factories. Now it's going to happen to your Main Street retailers and stores, your fast food restaurants, and eventually your truck stops and highways. This is the true cause of the dislocations around the country. So I went to Washington, D.C., and I said, what are we going to do about it? And what do you think they said to me when I asked them, what are we going to do about it?
Nothing.
More research.
The three most common answers I got were, number one, we cannot talk about that. Number two, we should study that further. And number 3, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. And that last one sounds responsible. And then I said, look, I checked out the data, the studies on how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers in the Midwest who lost their jobs, those 4 million workers. You all want to guess how effective government-funded retraining programs were on a percentage basis?
0 to 15.
0 to 15%. That's right. They were essentially entirely ineffective. But when I said that to the people in Washington, D.C., you know what they said to me next? I guess we'll get better at it. That's what passes for policy out of D.C. They are disconnected and their incentives are not tied to actually solving these problems. And there was one person in D.C. who set me on a path that led me to you all. He said, Andrew, no one here will do anything about anything you're talking about. Because this town, Washington, D.C., is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way we will do anything is if you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I heard that and I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back. And that's what got me to run for president. That's why I'm here with you all today. How many people are in this coffee shop, in this room with us right now? Let's call it whatever the fire code is. Oh, that one is. So let's say there are 60 people here in this room. 70 maybe, including the overflow. Do you know how many Californian voters, for example, each Iowan voter is worth? 1,000. So you see 60 Iowans, that's enough to start a revolution. That's like 2 football stadiums full of Californians. That's why I'm here. This is where the wave gets formed and gets started, and then we bring this wave down on their heads starting next February. So this is the mission. The question is, what is the wave? What is the vision? If you're here today, you heard something at some point like this. There's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. Raise your hand if you heard that at some point. Oh, you remember that? You heard that. And the first time you heard that, you thought it was a joke, you thought it was a gimmick, you thought it would never happen. But if you dig into our country's history, this dividend is a deeply American idea. Thomas Paine was for it at our founding, called it the Citizens Dividend. Martin Luther King fought for it in the 60s, called it the guaranteed minimum income for all Americans. And it is what he was fighting for when he was assassinated in 1968. 1,000 economists endorsed it in the 60s. It passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. It was called a Family Assistance Plan. And then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. I don't believe it, it's true. $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that?
Oil.
And how do they pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Technology.
Technology, AI, robots, data, big data. A study just came out that said that our data is worth more than oil. Do you all remember getting your data check in the mail? No. That is the 21st century economy. They're getting the data check from our data, and we're seeing none of it. So the vision is of an economy that works for us, that's trickle up instead of trickle down. And the great thing about it is after I'm president, thank you, Iowa, after I'm president in 2021 and you're getting this $1,000 a month, where would you spend it in real life?
Locally.
Yeah, how much of it would stay right here in Iowa?
Quite a bit, this coffee shop.
Yeah, the coffee shop would get busier, your business might get busier, it would go to daycare and car repairs you've been putting off, and Little League signups and local organizations. A little bit of it would float up to the cloud. You'd spend a little bit more with Amazon and maybe you'd upgrade your Netflix subscription or something. But most of it would stay right here in Iowa. It would circulate over and over again throughout your economy. It would create about 20,000 new jobs right here in Iowa very, very quickly. It would grow your consumer economy by about 12%. And the great thing is that because the money comes into your hands, it ends up making our entire society work better. We get stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, our kids graduate from school at higher levels, our stress levels go down, our decision making improves, our hospital visits go down. All of that happens if everyone's getting $12,000 a year. Now, it would be a pipe dream if we were anywhere but Iowa. But here in Iowa, you can take this vision and bring it to the rest of the country very, very quickly. That's why I love spending time here. That's why this place is so magical. Because the rest of the country, if you say, hey, we're going to make this economy work for us, they look up and they think they're powerless. They think their vote doesn't matter. For the most part, they are correct. In most of the country, their vote does not matter. They look up, they see the pipes clogged with money, millions of dollars, the lobbyists, the corporate interests, just like crouching there on top of our government in DC. They're right. The only way to flush out those pipes is for this vision to begin here in Iowa. And if this vision does not get started in 2020, then we're going to have to wait for 4 more years of the AI getting smarter, the self-driving trucks starting to hit the highways in earnest, your stores closing, your fast food restaurants kicking people out. I'm going to use one last example. When you call a customer service line of a big company and you get a bot, what do? 000, give me. How many of you do that? I do that too. We all do that. But in 2 or 3 years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be efficient, delightful, seamless. You might not even realize the software. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who answer a phone for a living right now in the call center, who make $14 an hour? I just spoke to a group of 70 CEOs in New York, and I asked them, how many of you are looking at getting rid of your back office clerical workers and replacing them with software and AI? Guess how many hands went up out of 70? All 70. Because you could fire those CEOs if they were not looking to do just that. If you go to a CEO of a business and say, hey, I can replace 1,000 of your workers with this AI software, they have to do that deal or they will be fired as soon as someone figures out that they didn't take that deal. Especially because the other CEOs are doing it and they have to follow suit. The system is doing what it's designed to do, but the system is not designed to improve our lives. We're operating under an assumption that the economy still works like it did in the 1970s and the 20th century, when these rules all held true. If I start a big successful company, I need to hire lots of people. I need to pay them well enough so they can afford my stuff. I need to give them proper benefits, and I need to operate like I care about what happens in my own backyard. Now, this is like the Henry Ford model. You hire auto workers, you have to pay them. I mean, the unions have to force you to pay them, but you know what I mean. Today, these rules are all breaking down before our eyes. If you have a profitable company, you don't need to hire lots of people. If you do hire lots of people, you can turn them all into gig workers or temps or contractors. 94% of the new jobs created are temporary jobs. You don't need to give them benefits, and you don't need to care about what happens in your own backyard because you're kind of everywhere and nowhere. So we're still pretending the economy works like that, and this system is not designed to help us. The clearest sign of that is that our GDP is at record highs. You know what else are at record highs right now in America? Suicides, drug overdoses, stress, financial insecurity. It has gotten so bad that our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years in a row. First time in 100 years. You all know the last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row? What was happening? Spanish flu of 1918. That's right, global pandemic kills millions. We're now back in Spanish flu territory. This is the clearest sign that our economy is not working for us. If your GDP is going up and your life expectancy is going down, which should you listen to? And one of the stories I tell is my wife is at home, literally, right now, with our young boys, one of whom is autistic. What is her work calculated out in GDP every day? 0. And we know that's nonsense. We know the work she's doing. I was off the trail for a couple of days taking care of our kids, and you know what I said after a couple of days? Get me back to doing something easy like running for president as fast as possible. I mean, if you're a parent, you know what I mean. It's the most challenging but important work, and our economy right now values it at 0. So the vision we need to take to the rest of the country is not just a foundation of $1,000 a month that makes us stronger and healthier, but we need to redefine what economic progress looks like. Even the inventor of GDP said this is a terrible measurement for national well-being and we should never use it as that. And here we are 100 years later following it off a cliff. So if I were to tell you that something got better in your community that would actually make you happy, that we could use to measure our progress, what would you suggest? What could we use? Health and life expectancy. If I said we're living longer and healthier, that's a win. I'd be happy about that.
Mental health.
Mental health and freedom from substance abuse. If I said we're happier and healthier and we have fewer people getting hooked on drugs, that would be an enormous win because we know so many people are struggling with addiction. I'm sure everyone in this room knows someone who's struggled with addiction. How about clean air and clean water? We actually have measurements for that. How about how our kids are doing? This sounds profound, but it's actually pretty straightforward. As your president, I will go down the street to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and say, hey, GDP, 100 years old, really kind of dumb at this point. We're going to update it to the American Scorecard that includes our health and well-being, our mental health, our environmental quality, and I'll report it to you all at the State of the Union every year in a PowerPoint deck. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint. You can't make progress if you don't have the right measurements. You have to have the right measurements, and then you invest resources in solving the real problems. For any of you who've run an organization, you look at our society. We're aiming at GDP, and GDP is the wrong target. And things are falling apart. This is why Donald Trump is our president today. He's our president in part because he got some of the problems right. What was his diagnosis? He said, hey, we're falling apart, but his solutions were, we're gonna build a wall, we're gonna turn the clock backwards, we're gonna bring the old jobs back. We have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society as quickly as possible. We have to evolve in the way we think about work and value. And I'm the ideal candidate for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. So I'm wearing a math hat right now. What does that stand for? American Harder. That's right. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to wake up our fellow citizens to the fact that it's not immigrants, it is technology and automation. We can build a better way of life for ourselves very, very quickly. And the number one criteria for Democratic primary voters for the nominee is what?
Beat Trump.
Beat Donald Trump. Who can beat Donald Trump? That's right. I am one of only 2 candidates in the field that 10% of Donald Trump voters say that they will support. Which means if I am the nominee, we win the whole thing. Woo! Woo! That's just the math. Democrats plus 10% equals victory. Right now, this is one reason why Joe Biden's in the lead. Because people look up and say Joe Biden is the most sure bet to beat Donald Trump. But when people realize that there's another sure bet, our campaign's just going to grow and grow and grow. And you can see it right now. I'm standing before you 6th of the national polls. And I have to admit, I started from a much lower base than that. About a year ago. We're one of only 2 campaigns as well as showing consistent growth. We are growing and expanding just as other campaigns are faltering. When we're here in Iowa, we need your help to take this vision to the rest of the country, and we can do it. This is the place, this is the time, and we are so charged up because we see that the vision's working. We see that the message is hitting. Well, we have to go to, how many of you all supported Donald Trump? Let's give a round of applause. We have to let our fellow Americans know that we get it. When Donald Trump said, we're going to make America great again in 2016, what was his response? America's already great. And that didn't work. We need a new response. We need to say we understand the depth of the problems. The problems are actually getting worse all the time. But that we have real solutions that people can get behind. That it's not just the Democrats and progressives, we can also get thousands of disaffected Trump voters like some of the people that have hands up. Independents? Any independents here? Yes. Here we go. Libertarians? We can build a much broader coalition to let our fellow citizens know that it's not left, it's not right, it is forward. And that's where we're going to take the country in 2020. Thank you very much, Iowa. I would love to take some questions from you all, because I know you've got it. I love these settings for that. Yes.
I fully agree that we need to spend as much money as possible to fix the climate solution, but to get that extra 10% over as far as your focus is concerned, I really want to know how dangerous is the debt and deficit right now? What's the path to fix it? And I hear a lot of questions on, so is Social Security going to be cut? Is Social Security going to be available to me? Can we opt out of Social Security?
Thanks for the question. The greatest lie in American life right now is that we don't have the money. You all remember voting for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street? I don't. Do you remember anyone caterwauling about where the money was? No. I don't. When it came time to bail out Wall Street, they said, $4 trillion, we got it. Even more recently, the tax cut, $1.5 trillion, the majority of that went to corporate shareholders. You know what percent of it went to workers? 6. 94% of it went to anything but the workers. So when people look at where the money is going, the money's not going to you all, right? There's a joke, it's like, why did we rob the bank? Because that's where the money is. We have to go where the money is right now. And I know where the money is. I know where the money's flowing. The money's flowing to the money centers. The money's flowing to the tech hubs. The money's flowing to the $1 trillion tech company like Amazon. And I want you to imagine this scene. The accountants walk into Jeff Bezos' office and say, hey, great news, 0 taxes for another year, 3rd year in a row. And then what does Jeff do? Jeff goes to his vault in the back, takes out bags of gold coins, gives them to the accountants. The accountants count them. So they're accountants, after all. And they bring them to their vehicles, they throw the gold coin in the vehicle, they drive home, and then they take a bath like Scrooge McDuck in the gold coins. I'm telling jokes about this because when you look at the deficit, if you have $1 trillion tech company like Amazon not paying taxes, then you're going to have debt problems over time. If we can plug in to every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile, we can generate hundreds of billions of new revenue. That's where the money is. The big lie is that we're all looking at each other saying like, we don't have the money, you have the money, I don't have the money, if you get the money, I don't get the money. The money's all disappearing into the cloud. We have to go back into the cloud and get it back, give it to us. I've run businesses. If you have a debt problem, what you do, you look at 2 things, revenue and expenses. Right now we have a revenue problem in this country. The biggest winners in the 21st century economy are not paying meaningful taxes. Any of the big tech companies are too smart for that, and we're too dumb. I'm going to ask you all a question. Whose fault is it that Amazon's paying 0 in taxes?
Ours.
Ours. It's not their fault. Accountants is doing their job. It's our fault. And it is up to you, the people of Iowa, to say, we get it. We're savvy enough to know that it is our fault that you are paying 0 in taxes. We're savvy enough to know that if you do not plug into the winners of the 21st century economy, we're never going to get the deficit right. So that's the revenue side of the ledger. If you plug into that, then you can start addressing your fiscal problems very, very quickly. On the expenditure side, there are a couple of big moves we can make. One is we're spending $750 billion on a military defense complex right now. And we need to spend money to keep ourselves safe, but a lot of that money right now is not directly doing so. So to the extent that we can take some of that money, bring it back home, and put it towards things like infrastructure development that creates jobs and also is economically more productive, that would be a big win. The second thing, and this is something that Democrats don't like to talk about, but I talk about, we do need to try and lighten up the government bureaucracy and get things done more efficiently. And that includes on some of the benefit programs that people are recipients of right now. Where there was a woman I know who's on disability, and I'm sure you all have family members or friends who are on disability. So this woman wanted to volunteer in her community, but she was afraid to do so because she was receiving disability and said, if I get identified as able-bodied, then I lose my benefits. And to me, that's a massive inefficiency. You know, she should be able to volunteer. She should be able to work 2 days a week if that's what she can do without fearing that she's going to lose her benefits. So right now we have structures that are much less efficient than they could be. And one of my big goals is to go in to the guts of our government and say, look, with 2019, 2020, we can get things done in a more modern way. So that's how I try to address the deficit. I think it's a serious problem, but I do think we're the most advanced, wealthy economy in the history of the world, and we cannot let them fake us out into thinking that we don't have the money to solve our own problems, because when the banks had problems, the money was there. When the tech companies have problems, the money is there. It's our turn. I'm going to try to find a woman. Yes, miss.
With global climate change, of course, and scarcity, when we talk about food scarcity in some of our communities, it's really hard for lower income individuals to get fresh food. Tech-wise, I know that there are things like aquaponics and things like that. What would you help the USDA to finance small businesses to do more tech-savvy things to help communities grow their own food? Like Iowa, yeah, you get plenty of grow time in the summer. You grow corn, you know, but we need to be growing other things all year.
I love community gardens. And the simplest way to improve our nutrition is to get more economic resources into people's hands. Because if you get more money into people's hands, then people eat healthier. And then if you're a healthy food store or vendor or a company, then you're trying to reach those customers. If people don't have money to spend, then they eat crap, because the crap is like the cheapest, most accessible food around. We have a food system that's very, very good at delivering inexpensive food with low nutritional value. So a lot of it is trying to change the economic resources available to different people. But I'm all for trying to help people grow grow food in community gardens in natural ways that helps diversify people's diets. There are technology solutions like aquaponics. A lot of it revolves around whether or not there is money and infrastructure in a particular community. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about this campaign is like we have a lot of problems in this country, and I'll tell you flat out, the easiest one to solve is our capital flows distribution. There's nothing stopping the majority of citizens in a democracy from voting ourselves a dividend of $1,000 a month. Nothing at all. Right now, everything's too. It's like, it's like that's actually the easiest thing we do. I have plans to fix our schools. I have plans to fix our healthcare systems. But if I stand here and say I'm going to fix your schools, I'd be lying. It's like, because each school is different. There are like hundreds of employees. They all have different structures. Like you can't magically fix all of America's schools, but you can magically fix our capital flows. And if you fix our capital flows, then people will have access to better food, and we'll be able to solve our problems much, much more directly. It's the major silver bullet that we can actually employ in real life. Yes, miss?
How are you going to do it with a Congress that might be resistant to it?
Well, thank you for asking. All right, so here's the vision. Andrew Yang sits in the polls, but rising, got like a big up arrow next to me. Up here to Iowa, we shop the world. We finish in the top, let's call it top 3 or top 4 in Iowa. People will be like, wow, Andrew Yang just beat these other people. And that's already happened. People are already like, wow, Andrew Yang's outperformed all these people. So with your help, we get the word out in Iowa, we put up a surprising result. I'm front page news just because I outperformed expectations. We go to New Hampshire. What is the third party in New Hampshire?
Libertarian.
Libertarians, right? They love the freedom dividend. It's like named after them. And New Hampshire is an open primary, which means Republicans can participate, independents can participate. So if you're a Republican, are you more interested in Donald Trump stopping William Weld, or the Asian guy you sort of like because he said some things you like, and you'd much rather have him than like Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden? You probably get involved in the Democratic race. New Hampshire is going to end up overperforming for me in a huge way because libertarians and Republicans and independents are going to come out for me in New Hampshire, and the polls are not going to pick that up. Because what's the first thing that the pollster asks? Are you a registered Democrat and likely to vote? So it's going to miss this whole swath of people. So I put up a big result in New Hampshire. We ride the wave. People realize that I am the best antidote to Donald Trump. We win. So your question is, how the heck do we pass this stuff, right? So I want you to play out January 2021. The Democrats are so happy to beat Donald Trump. They're like, we did it. We took a bet on the Asian man. It took a little bit of convincing, but we did it, and he won, and now we are pumped. And we're going to pass the dividend because it makes our children and families stronger, healthier, and he ran on the dividend the whole time. Now here's the kicker. The Republicans look at it and say, wait a minute. This is a huge win for rural areas, for red states, for places that have gotten blasted by automation. Am I against the dividend? And if you look at the intellectual heritage of the dividend, Alaska, that's had the dividend for 40 years, that was a Republican government. That's a deep red state. And we don't need 80% of Congress to pass this thing. We just need 51%. Do you think I can get some Republicans to cross the aisle and vote for a dividend for their people? And imagine if they did not vote for it. Can you imagine their offices and phone lines? People will be like, why are you against the dividend? We like the dividend. Give the dividend a chance. Cash is sort of hard to demonize. You know what I mean? It's like the money's going to hurt you. It's like, no, it's not. Come on. So after we get the dividend across the finish line, then Americans will have this really unusual feeling of success. They're going to be like, wow, I got the dividend? That happened? This is really happening? And then we can move towards solving some of the other problems that have historically been bipartisan, like infrastructure. And Republicans tend to like me because I come across as non-ideological, a problem solver. I'll work with anyone. And it is true. I don't care where the good idea comes from as long as it's a good idea. I believe I can get things done in a bipartisan fashion in a way that's different than some of the other candidates. In the back, sir.
You know, a lot of what you talk about, I remember in the late 60s or 70s reading Kurt Vonnegut's book, Player Piano. And a lot of what you're talking about sounds like the future he has, where automation has put most people out of work. What your $12,000 is basically welfare. It doesn't cover an awful lot. I don't see that you will ever get it through Congress. And I really, I think it's a false equivalency to draw this to Alaska, because Alaska was part of a deal that if we let the oil companies come in and pump oil on public lands, we're going to first of all give the Native Americans money, and then it graduated, became everybody else. It was a quid pro quo for allowing people to pump oil. I just don't, to be honest, sir, I think your plan is so unrealistic. I keep waiting. What's the fallback? What's the fallback position? Because the future that you're describing to me doesn't seem, frankly, like a very good future. Where we should be is training people to get in the jobs of the new future, not paying them $1,000 a month. I think that, to be honest, I think you're completely missing the boat about where we should be going in the future.
So, sir, I have a few responses to that. First, the quid pro quo you're talking about is already on. They're already taking our data and profiting to the tune of billions of dollars. So when you talk about the oil money making this grand deal, the deal has already been struck. It's just we haven't actually been getting anything out of it.
A deal between who?
Excuse me, let me respond.
All right.
The second thing is you say we should be educating and retraining our people. Of course we should. But the question I pose to you is, if the government has historically been really, really bad at it, saying we're going to do more of what has not worked, is that actually a recipe for success when it failed the manufacturing workers? And when I go to a truck stop in Davenport, Iowa 80, if you go to everyone there and say, hey, I'd like to retrain you, what percentage of them would respond positively to that? Not a high percentage. You'd be more likely to get punched in the face by one of those truck drivers and have them sign up on your clipboard. So if a politician says, again, we're going to educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future, they're essentially lying. And I am not a liar. The third thing is that you are right that $1,000 a month does not solve the problem for everyone. But I want you all to imagine this town. How many adults live in Muscatine approximately?
About 24,000.
24,000. So I want you to imagine this town with an extra $24 million in spending power every single month. And that money mostly flows right through your communities. Does this coffee shop get busier? Yes. Do they hire another person? Yes. Does an entrepreneur who wants to start a new business all of a sudden have a better shot? Yes. Do they need to hire people? Yes. Does the mechanic that has, now a back order of car repairs need to try and train and hire a new mechanic? Yes. This is the economy that would actually work for people as long as the spending power flowed through your town. People want to work. I love work. But we have to think bigger about the kind of work we're doing. We have to broaden our ideas about it. And we have to be visionary enough to rebuild an economy that actually revolves around our own values and needs. Yes?
Going up $1,000 a month. You mentioned earlier about Amazon not being end taxes. At what level would you have them in terms of tax percentage? And then what percentage of your freedom dividend would that fund?
My plan is to pass something called a value-added tax, which is something that's been passed in every other country that's an advanced economy except for ours. Every other country is smart enough to see that the Amazons of the world cannot pay zero in taxes. If we were to pass a value-added tax at even half the European level, it generates $800 billion in new revenue. That plus the spending power in our hands creating new revenue because the money flows through our economy, plus the savings on things like incarceration, homelessness services, emergency room healthcare. I was with a corrections officer in New Hampshire who said this to me: we should pay people to stay out of jail because we spend so much when they're in. We save billions on that. And then the great thing is, how many of you all have worked for a company that had a training program? Raise your hands up. And whenever you're part of a good company, they say we're going to invest in our people, right? And then they put you into a training program. Some of it, frankly, is not very good. But some of it you get some real value out of. And their thinking on it is that if we make you stronger, better at your job, then we as a company pay our benefits. In the public sector, we have the opposite point of view. We see our people as costs, and we try and spend as little as possible. If you put $1,000 a month into our hands, studies have shown that it actually increases the GDP by $700 billion based upon better health and education outcomes. So the short answer to your question is, a value-added tax at half the European level, take a toll from the Amazons of the world, generates $800 billion in new revenue. With all of these other cost savings and economic growth measures, it actually balances out to $1,000 a month. I've done the math. It'd be pretty bad if I hadn't done the math. Miss?
So part of, if I understand it, part of funding the dividend also comes from a carbon fee in dividend.
Yes.
And you have proposed a specific one, you know, I think it's like $40 a ton or something.
Yeah, that's right.
And it adds every year, but only for a certain amount of years.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that it might take some time to hammer that out. Would you be agreeable to, say, adopting one that's already, there's several already in Congress?
Yep.
Including one that is considered bipartisan and has been really worked out. It starts off lower, but it improves every year up until 2050.
Very much so. I'm a very pragmatic person, and if there's a bipartisan deal that's slightly different than the proposal I have in terms of the price. To me, how many of you all studied economics? Some of you. I can sense that. It's good. So if you studied economics, you know that one of the big problems you have to do is try and bring in externalities. Pollution's one of the biggest externalities. If I pollute, it doesn't cost me, it costs everyone like a tiny, tiny bit. But then everyone pollutes, and then it costs us all significantly. So if someone else has a different price for carbon that we can agree on that's not my $40 a ton, I'm all for it. But we just need to start pricing it. Because as soon as we start pricing it, then corporate incentives will improve. And they'll benefit if they emit lower levels. Yes?
I was wondering if we could talk about your higher education plan.
Sure.
So I read
Okay, where
that
to?
I'm a professor of chemistry.
He's gonna guess.
Yeah, just again. So I read that you want to change the administrative personnel to student ratio, and in order to do that, you would limit public funding to public universities in order to make it happen. Two things. One is that I think most funding comes from states, not federal, to public universities. And so how would that connect from a federal level? And then two, when I've been at institutions where all of a sudden we get less public funding, it tends to not squeeze the administrators, it tends to squeeze the faculty and the students. So how does that all come together?
Well, thank you for the question. I come from an academic family. My father, grandfather, uncle, and brother are all professors. So I'm like the educational representative there. But I love academia. I think that it's an incredibly valuable field. The problem to me is that we're paying professors not enough. Right now there's so many postdocs who are in this purgatory where they're never going to actually have full faculty positions. There's going to be paid as subsistence wages, essentially forever. They're going to be thrown in front of students as they teach those classes because the academic institution does not prioritize either that adjunct professor's advancement or, frankly, a lot of the teaching that they do. So what do the universities prioritize? Growth. And so the money that they bring in is going to administrators. Why is college 2.5 times more expensive now than it was when I went to school? It has not gotten 2.5 times better. We do not have 2.5 times more professors. You're not paying the professors 2.5 times more. What are you doing? You have 2.5 times more administrators. That's what happens in a complex bureaucracy, and I can't knock them in a way because I started and ran a national nonprofit. And if you are, how many of y'all work in nonprofits? So if you're a nonprofit administrator and you start to grow, what's the first thing you do? hire another nonprofit administrator. That's what's happened in the universities, and it's not deliberate. But at this point, it has gone overboard, and it's caused essentially the cost to spiral. Families have felt they had no choice but to pay it. And then the government says, well, we'll give you loans. So we're up to 1.5 trillion in student loan debt, up from less than 100 billion in that time. So back to your questions, the first thing is, even if the federal government's not giving you direct grant money as an academic institution, this is the giant club, you're all tax exempt. And the tax exemption is worth hundreds of millions or billions. So anything the federal government does, essentially educational institutions have to do. The second thing is, the last thing we would ever want to do is get money away from professors. If anything, we have to try and push universities to prioritize their educational mission. And to the extent that their funding is tied to anything, it's the administrator to student ratio. It's not faculty to student. Faculty to student actually needs to go the other direction, but the administrator to student ratio needs to come down. Now, bigger picture, we're overselling college to young people. We're saying college, 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 and then it's so expensive and they feel like they have no choice but to go. They graduate with tens of thousands of debt into job markets that don't really welcome them. 94% of the new jobs in this country are temporary gig contract work that don't have secure benefits. And 40 to 44% of recent college graduates are underemployed. That is doing a job that does not require a college degree. So we are overselling college, and what are we underselling? Vocational, technical, apprenticeship. Only 6% of American high school students are in technical tracks. You know what that percentage is in Germany? 59%. Think of that gulf. And these jobs are actually very, very hard to automate away. It is easier to automate away an entry-level college grad job, administrative, than it is a plumber, an HVAC repair person, like a line repair. Those things are actually very tricky to automate. Can you imagine what it would take to automate a plumber? It's going to be a human plumber for a long time. And they're going to charge us whatever they want. So we need to start presenting alternative visions of success to our young people. It needs to start at the high school level and say, look, if you want to work with your hands, these are really secure, solid, well-paying jobs. There's actually a massive shortage of these sorts of workers in our economy. We have hundreds of thousands of unfilled technical jobs because our young people are being sent to college instead. So there are a bunch of pieces to the puzzle, but the last thing I would ever want to do is take money away from teachers and professors in the classroom. And I agree with you too that the stripping away of public funding for college has not been the right move. In the back, sir.
What do you think is the role of like drones in the U.S. military and armed forces?
I'm hesitating because I don't want to get too science fiction-y and scary. But drones are the future of warfare. Most anyone who can look at it sees that. And a recent study came out that said essentially we're at a point where technology is more efficient than humans in terms of aiming and firing weapons. And in the battle context, every microsecond counts. So we're in the process of essentially outsourcing our warfare to technology. That sounds very science fiction and Terminator-ish, but it's accurate. As your president, the last thing I want to do, and if you saw the attacks on the Saudi Arabian oil fields, there's some dispute as to whether they were drones or not. But one thing I can tell you very categorically is that we're entering an era where offensive capability is going to outstrip defensive capability by a very wide margin. Because if you are a determined group and you get a series of militarized drones, these drones are not like jets. These drones can just be the size of a vacuum cleaner. So if you have a flying drone the size of a vacuum cleaner and you attach explosives to it, or munitions, or nasty things, and then you direct it towards a target, how do you defend against that? Like a flying vacuum cleaner with explosives attached to it. You know what I mean? Like that is the offensive capability. We're entering an era of asymmetrical warfare that is going to be really, really difficult to manage. Very, very frightening. And there was a period in American history, very recently, where we were kind of the drone superpower. We had the flying drones that could target using satellites, and we used them. The scales are about to change where drone access is going to become much more egalitarian. And so I do not want to pursue the drone superpower route because it's going to end up biting us. It's going to end up working against us. I signed a pledge to end the forever wars. I want to make it clear to everyone, including the American people, that it's time to pull back from this constant state of armed conflict we've been in for 18 years plus. It's cost us trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives to unclear benefits. What does the Constitution say? It's up to Congress to declare war. Congress gave that power to the executive branch 18 years ago in Washington. It said we want to hold it. That is not appropriate. If we're going to enter into armed conflict, it needs to be the will of the American people through Congress. It cannot be the president just firing away. So that is the vision. I would reinvest in diplomacy and relationships and our alliances abroad. I have a three-part test for getting involved in an international conflict. Number one, there needs to be a clear, vital American national interest, or we can avert a humanitarian catastrophe. Number two, there needs to be a clear and defined timeline that we know when we're going to be able to lead. And number three, our allies need to be engaged and with us on it. And if those three things aren't met, then I do not believe we should be putting our men and women in armed forces in harm's way. And I also don't think we should be sending drones to kill people unless those things are being met. One more question. Let's make it good. And it's going to be, I think I promised him a question. Thank you, though. I'll get you, though, man.
Mine was also based on Congress in terms of the UBI.
Been answered? All right, good man. Oh, wait, if you're okay, then let's pitch it to person in the back. Yes.
Hey, like 14 years ago, I was a diesel mechanic. I went to Eaton Transmission, and the instructor was teaching me to rebuild the transmission. Said they won't have automatic semi-transmissions until automation's on the horizon. So I lost my job. I went to a different route and became a truck driver. About 4 years ago, I saw my first automatic truck. Now, automatic.
Oh, automatic.
No manual. Now, on the horizon is truck automation. I'm a truck driver and I work in agriculture. For the first time since 1995, I'm actually laid off. And, you know, my family's kind of suffering, not really suffering, but, you know, we're not meeting criteria that I'd like to meet myself or whatever. Yeah. And I understand about the retraining, the training programs and what people have said about it. And I feel like it failed me because I was a good mechanic, lost that job, became a truck driver, and you know, now I'm laid off and I don't really see a good future for myself in that class, anywhere to do with that class. I believe the dividend would help people like me and other people who are going to be misplaced step forward instead of backwards and not have to worry so much about my children, my wife, my future. And I guess the short part or the long part of my question would be, as a candidate for president, you say a lot of the right things, and I'm sure all of us in this room are going to say we've heard all the right things before. What's your dedication level?
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Let's keep around. I'm going to walk through the self-driving trucks in greater detail just because I think it's important and relevant. So my friends in California say they're 98% of the way there, which sounds really high. But 2% is a very, very big error rate when you're talking about semi-trucks. Because you can't have semi-trucks smashing into things at 2%. And the robot trucks are really bad with something called snow. Because they rely upon road markings, and if the road markings get covered by snow, then the robot's not sure what to do. So how do they think they can get the next 2%? And this is also a reason for why all the tests are in Arizona. So how do they think they can get the last 2%? Do you all remember the first time you watched motion video on your phone? Remember that? You're like, wow, we can do that now? So that's 3G. We're moving towards 5G. And the vision for 5G is that they're going to equip trucks with teleoperating software so that an operator in Nevada can get a signal that the truck's not sure what to do because the weather's bad. They then beam into the truck and drive it like a video game. They see it out the front through cameras, and they just drive it until the computer's like, okay, I've got it again, and then they beam back out. What is the ratio going to be between teleoperators and truckers?
100 to 1.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to need like a couple of teleoperators for every fleet of robot trucks. So this is the future. You're still going to probably need a human to get into the truck 10 miles outside the urban area and then get in, unload and unload. But like 80% of the route, you can just have a self-driving truck. Now your question is about my dedication. Like the biggest signal I can give you is that I've got 2 young kids, one of whom is 6, one of whom is 4, and the 6-year-old is autistic. The 4-year-old started public school last week and I wasn't there. You know, I'm here in Iowa for the 18th time because I believe that I can contribute to the success and health of my country. And I love this country. I was born in this country. I feel privileged to be an American. My parents came here to create a better life for myself and my brother, and it worked. And the question is, can we pass along a better life to our kids? I have a feeling you're all here today because you're not sure, or you think the answer is no. And if you think the answer is no, by the numbers, you are correct. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there's a 93% chance you're going to do better than your kids. That's the American dream. That's what a lot of us grew up with. If you were born in the 1990s, that chance is down to 50-50. And it's going down. This is what I see, and I'm here to try and help. I have never had some long-standing political ambition. I'm actually a bit of an introvert. I don't know if you can tell. No, I was like a nerdy Asian kid who just liked to read. It's all true. So I'm here with you making this case because I think that we can make things better for our kids, and I'm in it to win it. We're going to win this whole thing.
Thank you. Andrew's going to do selfies and photos right out here. I'm going to take it and just kind of follow you guys in this way. Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
There's the
The $1,000 to the 10 people that you promised at the last debate, when are those people going to get that money?
We're going to have them there as soon as possible. We're determining the winners of dividend. But you'll know very, very soon. It's going to be a matter of days.
So within the next week or so, those people will actually get the money?
Well, we're going to announce it within that time frame. Okay. It might take us a little bit longer for them to get the money, but it'll be shortly thereafter.
Okay, and then I want to ask you about the Des Moines Register poll that came out yesterday. You jumped 9 points in that poll. So obviously something's working in Iowa. How do you keep that momentum going forward? And if you're going to keep that momentum going, you have another 4 months or so. So is it good to be surging now? How do you feel about that poll result?
Well, we've been only one of only 2 campaigns that's grown the whole time. So we love surging now. We're just going to keep on growing and growing. We just opened 2 offices in the state today, and we had over 100 people at each opening. So the excitement in Iowa is growing, and you're just going to see us continue to climb from here.
And then a quick news of day question. Obviously, the whistleblower story is still going on. There's an unverified report that President Trump may have encouraged or pressured a Ukrainian official to look into Joe Biden's son. What's your reaction to that? And is that an impeachable offense?
My reaction is that Donald Trump has verified for the 1000th time who he is, and my job is to beat him at the ballot box in 2020. It's up to Congress whether to move forward with impeachment, but my expectation is that if he's still there, I need to be there to beat him.
And then a quick question for you on a personal note. Obviously, you are using Twitter quite a bit in this campaign. It's something that I notice a lot, and a lot of other people are noticing as well. Is that you that's tweeting all the time?
It is almost always me. And I think you can tell that if you just read it. You're like, that would be very, very difficult for a staffer to impersonate. So it's mostly me, and I find it to be a really useful way to connect with our supporters.
And is that a strategy? Obviously, the President of the United States also uses Twitter. Is that something you're kind of going for?
Well, to me, you have to lean into your own style of campaigning, and I think most people realize I'm not a politician, I'm a human being, I'm a citizen, I'm a parent, and so social media is another way of reaching out and letting people get to know me.
And then I want to ask you, obviously Cory Booker yesterday expressed some concerns about fundraising. Do you share some of those concerns, being a candidate that's polling in 6th? Do you share those concerns getting into the next few debates, and then also just continuing your campaign?
We're growing very, very rapidly. We're going to put up a record fundraising total for Q3. And so while other campaigns might not be growing, we definitely are. You're going to see us not just on the October debate stage, but we're going to have the resources we need to compete the entire race.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Give the guys that back. Nice job.